speakers all day, marching bands and that sort of thing, but I'm going to dive right into our first introduction. I'm introducing each one of these speakers with a lot of pride. I'm proud of everyone that's going to be here today. The first person I want to bring up is Larken Rose. Larken Rose, if you don't know him, he's a self-proclaimed enemy of the state. He's a tax heretic, the author of 3 books, and his most latest book, The Iron Web, got great reviews within the freedom movement. And has anybody seen America, Freedom to Fascism? Good. Put together by our late filmmaker Aaron Russo, who also made Trading Places, by the way. Made a movie called Freedom to Fascism, and the speaker is our next speaker, Larken Rose. Give a round of applause to Larken Rose.
Thank you very much. I'm going to say some things today that are going to anger a lot of people and offend a lot of people and probably make lots of people go, yay! But I'm pretty sure you won't be bored. 233 years ago, a bunch of guys got together right over there and they wrote a letter to their king. And it was a very well thought out, very eloquent letter, but it basically boiled down to this. Dear King George, you're not the boss of us. Sincerely, bunch of troublemakers. Because that's essentially what the Declaration of Independence was. It was not whining to the king, oh, will you please be nice and lower your taxes and do this. In fact, the Declaration specifically describes how they had tried that and it didn't work. Now, for all the parades and celebrations and picnics and fireworks that are going to go on today across this country, all the millions of people engaged in this celebration, how many of them actually think about what the Declaration of Independence was? What those people did? Those people were criminals. They were tax cheats. They were traitors. They looked their government, the British Crown, in the face and said, we do not acknowledge your right to rule us at all. They did not say, will you please reduce this and please be nicer here. They said, it's over. Truth be told, some of the colonists were cop killers. If you don't believe me, what do you think happened at Lexington when King George's law enforcers said, you colonists, lay down your guns? They said, no, you're not the boss of us. And so we had the shot heard around the world, which is widely regarded as the beginning of the American Revolution. How many people celebrating across this country today actually support that kind of radical, extremist action and attitude that you can go to your own government and say, we're not going to obey you anymore. We do not acknowledge your right to rule us at all ever again. Personally, I doubt it's very many Americans. We have lots of sort of residual freedoms left over from what a bunch of radicals did a long time ago, and it's sort of fun to be this close to where some very significant steps in that happened. But the bad news is the spirit that allowed this country is basically dead in the vast majority of Americans. The vast majority of Americans are absolutely incapable of thinking, much less speaking, the concept, you're not the boss of me. Now, when we look back, it's easy for us to cheer, hooray for the rebels, and we know how it turned out. We know they won. We know the revolution was successful, and King George got his butt kicked. So we can say, yay, yay, hooray. But make no mistake, when you cheer for the people who had the American Revolution, you are cheering for traitors and criminals. They broke the law. Freedom is always illegal. Let this one thing sink in. If you don't hear anything else, freedom is always illegal because the people who want power over you will always say keeping what you earn is against the law. Being armed is against the law. Determining your own future is against the law. And how many Americans, as much as they celebrate Independence Day, are capable of even thinking those thoughts? Let's do a comparison. Suppose a group in this country today did what the founders did 233 years ago. Suppose they wrote a letter to the United States government, a letter to Congress and the President, and said, "We will not pay your taxes ever again. We will not obey your laws ever again. We do not acknowledge your right to rule us at all ever again. And when you send your thugs to enforce your will on us, we will resist." How many Americans dare to even think that? And what would most Americans think of any group that did that? Horrible criminals and traitors and fringe lunatics, and we can't have that. Well, why do we have this double standard? Why is the whole country having these huge celebrations over Independence Day where a bunch of criminals broke the law, committed treason, and resisted authority, when the vast majority of all those people out there having celebrations would be the first in line to condemn anyone who did that today? Why the double standard? Did morality change sometime in the last 233 years? In short, the spirit of resistance, the ability to say, "You're not the boss of me," is gone from the vast majority of American culture. It has been trained out of us. And for all the pride people express today, I'm here to tell you, the American people are wimps. And why is that? It's not just bad luck. It's not a coincidence. For years and years and years, the churches, the schools, the media, the government, society in general has taught us one rule above all else. Obedience to authority is the highest virtue, and disobedience is the worst sin. That is the message that comes through everything else. And you can see it. Here's where I'm going to offend a lot of people. You can see it in the freedom movement. Because the vast majority of the freedom movement consists of people saying, let's vote for these people, let's push for this legislation, let's lobby for this and that and the other thing. And they couch their demands in, of course, we will only do things within the system. We would never advocate anything illegal. Well, I hate to spoil your party, but the Declaration of Independence was not about doing something within the system. It was about saying, we're free whether authority says so or not, and we will resist. Even if you call it law, even if you call yourself government, even if you wear fancy hats and have big, important meetings, we will resist because we own ourselves. So how many people advocate that now? Patrick Henry, Thomas Paine, where are they in the mainstream? They're not there. There's a few fringe wackos like me and a bunch of people I see here. But these people that get revered all across the country as being these great heroes of the American Revolution, the people who cheer for them do not believe what those men believed in. They believed in something called unalienable rights. That means you have a right to do something. If the law says you can't do it, you still have the right to do it. If the government says you can't do it, you still have the right to do it. Unalienable means nothing anyone in the world can do takes away your right to do that. Now they can infringe on that right, which they do on a regular basis. They can stomp on you and they can hurt you and they can punish you, but it will never be legitimate. And nobody should ever bow. Sorry, I hear thunder here. It's fake thunder, don't worry. That nobody should ever bow to someone who says, well, no, we had these elections and these processes and this and that and the other thing. Now I have the right to infringe on this and that and the other thing. Nothing gives them the right. That's what unalienable means. But Americans, by and large, do not believe that. Now, some people, every once in a while, will say, well, it was really oppressive back in 1776, and we're just not quite to that point yet. If 2 to 3% taxation justified a revolution in 1776, why doesn't 50% and growing justify a revolution? If a few little excise taxes on pieces of paper and tea justified open lawlessness from these rebels that we're all celebrating, why don't the myriad of incomprehensible, unavoidable, crushing taxes, state, local, and federal, why don't they justify a revolution today? If the occasional abuse of the colonists by the redcoats justified a revolution back then, why isn't it justified today by the fact that the vast majority of American law enforcement see no problem at all with randomly stopping you, detaining you, interrogating you, and searching you for any reason they like or no reason at all? If you read the Fourth Amendment, you realize, wow, they had a revolution over that. So where's the spirit? With all the flag waving and with all the celebrating, where are the people who actually believe in what happened right over there 233 years ago? What exactly are we proud of if we let that go? People talk about American pride. What is it they're proud of? That reminds me, somebody gave me a note here to read you. The guy's name was Samuel Adams. Yeah, the beer guy, but he did some other stuff too. If ye love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that ye were our countrymen. So what happened? Why did this nation lose its ability to say, you're not the boss of me? Even among people who say we're the most ardent supporters of freedom, if you say, are you willing to break the law? They say, no, I would never do that. In other words, you're ardent advocates of freedom as long as the tyrants give their permission. That's not being advocates of freedom. In Lexington, what happened when the troops said, lay down your guns? Did they say, can't we keep them pretty, please? Okay, here you go. No, they said no. Where are the Americans capable of saying no? I'm not talking about voting and whining to your congressman. I'm talking about resistance. And I know even hearing about this makes a lot of people very uncomfortable, because the American people do not believe what the Founding Fathers believed. The problem is we have been trained for years and years and years to measure our worth based on how well we obey authority. Not on how we treat other people, not on what we produce, on how well we obey authority. Consider the example of the phrase, law-abiding taxpayer. People use that constantly, and what they mean when they say, I'm a law-abiding taxpayer, is, I'm a good person. Okay, but what does law-abiding taxpayer actually mean? Well, the law-abiding means you do what the politicians tell you. Now, as much as we revere the law, and we talk about those nasty lawbreakers and those great law-abiding citizens, and we talk as if the law is some proclamation from on high, we know who writes them. They're a bunch of liars and crooks. Does anybody not know that the politicians are a bunch of liars and crooks? So why is it that when they say you have to do this, you're not allowed to do that, we call it law and we bow to it like it came down from on high? It's the commands of crooks, but we have been trained to view it as the measure of whether we are good people. Let's consider a few examples. Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany had a whole lot of law-abiding taxpayers who went along with the agenda of the Third Reich and who funded it. Were they the good guys? Nope. The good guys in Nazi Germany were the criminals, the people who said, what you're doing is illegal. I will disobey your laws and I will not pay your taxes. Same thing under Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, Castro. You can go right down the list. It's a really long list. The good people were not the people who were law-abiding taxpayers. The good people were the people who said, I am not going to help those people wearing the label of government to oppress and injure and murder my fellow man. If they call that law, I am proud to be a criminal. And as much as we revere the law, if you need politicians telling you what's right and wrong, something's horribly wrong. Here's a quote from Thomas Jefferson, because I just want to let you know, I'm not the first radical wacko to say these sorts of things. Rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will, within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. I do not add within the limits of the law, because law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. So what about right here? We can look at lots of other times, lots of other places and say, hooray for the people who broke the law. We can look back in this country's history when slavery was legal. Just as evil, but it was legal. Were the good guys the people who went along with it? Nope, the good guys broke the law. And we can see that in this country, in the past, and lots of other countries, present and past. What about this country today? Do we really want to tell ourselves that, well, no, it's not okay to resist now? Among other things. When people feel this moral obligation to obey the law, and they speak it as if it's some proclamation from on high, what exactly is your moral obligation to work really hard so you can give thousands of dollars to Obama so he can give them to international bankers? Yeah. Where is the moral obligation?
Nowhere.
Where is the moral obligation to fund whatever war any politician happens to say, hey, I bet if I do that it'll help my image? Why do we believe we have a moral obligation to obey whatever they call law? Here's a radical thought. You have a moral obligation to recognize and honor the rights of every individual on the planet, no matter what the law says. And do we all feel a moral obligation to finance the police state we see growing up all over the place? Trouble is, we've forgotten a very important secret. And the founders, a bunch of them referenced it, but even they didn't seem to fully grasp it. Here it is. I have to say it quietly. It's a secret. You own yourself. Oh, you've heard that secret?
And this country.
You own yourself. Now, when I say that to almost anybody, they say, well, of course I do.
And the country.
Are you sure you think that? Yeah, of course I do. Of course I own myself. So you own your time and effort. Yeah. So what you produce with your time and effort, no one has the right to take that from you by force without your consent, right? Oh, of course not. What if they call it taxes? Oh, that's different. No, it's not. It is not different. If you own yourself, someone calling himself government, someone calling his demands laws and taxes or anything else, it is still theft. And there are some radical wackos in history like Frederick Bastiat who did a great job of explaining that obvious truth, a truth that is completely lost on the vast majority of Americans. And I could go down the list for ages, which I'm not going to do. If you own yourself, would you have to pay rent for the property you already bought? No. What if it's called property taxes? If you own yourself, doesn't that imply, and if you have the right to life, liberty, and property, they changed the last one to happiness because it sounded more poetic. Initially, it was going to be life, liberty, and property, because property is essential to freedom. If I can't make something and own it myself, then what good is my time worth to me if it doesn't belong to me? So back when it was called life, liberty, and property, if you have the right to those things, doesn't that sort of imply you have the right to defend those things against all aggressors? What if the aggressors say, well, we're government and this is law? You know, everybody can see if some thug comes to your house and points a gun at you and says, hand it over because I want it, then it's perfectly okay to defend yourself. But if they call it government and they call it law and they call it taxes, suddenly everyone's perception drastically changes. Suddenly, the guy who produced it, who says, wait, I produced this, I want to keep it, he's the evil, nasty, greedy criminal. And the thug pointing a gun at him to say, nope, sorry, goes to the politicians, he's the noble law enforcer. When did our perception of reality get so messed up? Now, I'm going to finish it up here. Hope I riled up enough people already. The concept of freedom and being able to defend your liberty sort of implies you have the right to have the ability to defend your liberty. Now, I have an email list, and a while ago I sent a thing to the list that says, I want every American to have the ability to forcibly resist federal agents. As you may expect, it freaked out some people who work over there. And I suspect it would freak out most of the country. What are you talking about? You want people to have the ability to kill law enforcers? Is that what you're saying? Yep. I'm not saying go out and slaughter them wildly. I'm saying you should have the ability. And 233 years ago, some guys explained why and demonstrated why you should have that ability. But as scared as people are of that concept, what's the alternative? That you should not have the ability to resist your own government. Which of those scares you more? Because I got to tell you, the idea of a people incapable of protecting itself from its own government, that's really scary to me. You have one obligation as human beings, and it goes directly against almost everything you've been taught in school and in society and in the media and everywhere else. Your obligation is to judge right and wrong for yourselves and to act accordingly. And if somebody says, no, 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 I'm the boss, I'm in charge, I'm authority, I lay down the law, you do this, you have the right to say, no, I'm not going to do the wrong thing just because the law tells me to. And when they huff and puff and say, you're nasty criminals and scofflaws and malcontents and horrible people that you would dare to disobey authority, you tell them, you're not the boss of me. Thank you.
If this speech got your attention and you're ready for more ideas you won't hear in the mainstream media, grab a copy of Larken Rose's new novel, The Iron Web. The Iron Web is a gripping adventure story that you won't want to put down, but it's also likely to shake up some of your favorite assumptions and longest-held beliefs. Many books entertain people. The Iron Web is the kind of book that changes people. Do you dare to read it?